Hey everyone, welcome back to Nothing Venture, Nothing Game. As always, I'm your host with the most, your GM Jared. And today I want to talk about the 3-action system in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Cue the intro, Stinger. Cue the intro. So, I was up and I was, checking out Reddit. I'm looking at my phone right now. And I see this all the time. It pops up on the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Reddit thread all the time. First Pathfinder 2 session, absolute blast, need some advice. And everyone's like, yeah, sure, let's give advice, right? I'm here giving advice. So it always boils down to the 3-action system. Hey, I have a caster, I am a caster, and the 3-action system. So I'm... a lot of times people talking, hey, I'm coming from 5th edition and I got to play Pathfinder 2nd edition. It was cool. It was, a lot of awesome stuff, a lot of options to build characters. But, the caster struggles the most. They say they're doing less than they feel that they were doing in 5th edition. And they want to know why, right? So first off, you have the caster, right? Many casters, in this case, it was an oracle, but a lot of times, you'll hear wizard, witch, all the different caster types to bard. And, you have this phenomenal cosmic power, as Jeannie put it.
Phenomenal cosmic powers!
Itty bitty living space.
All this power is shaped the cosmos, but it burns 2 actions. And then the caster always finds himself just like, hey, I'm just going to take 1 action to move into range and then cast my spell. And at level 1 to, early levels, you feel like everyone else is doing something but you. The champion is raising their shield, punching the bad guy in the face, and then taking another action. Maybe they're taking a 5-foot step to interpose themselves between someone else, and the ranger, is firing 2 shots and then running and then commanding their pet to do something. And all these are plausible actions that they could take. And then you have the caster, right? The caster is like, I wield the cosmic might and I cast my spell and I take a 5-foot step. Yay. So I understand a lot of the casters, they feel like, hey, what else can I do in Pathfinder 2nd edition? I have this 3-action system, it's dope, but I feel like everyone else is doing so much more than me. So here are just some tips to do this. And yes, before we get deeper into this video, of course, you're going to hear about recall knowledge, but I'm going to put that at the end because everyone knows recall knowledge. So stick around, get right into it. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is deception. Deception is a great skill, and many casters have the opportunity to use this ability. Now, this is a single action and to create a diversion. Now, I'm on our favorite friendly archive of Netis webpage. If you're new to Pathfinder, check this out. It has a lot of the abilities, a lot of the skills from all the books. And you just it's very intuitive. You'll figure it out. It's great, especially for a GM. It's great to look up, hey, I need an item, or I don't know what something does. It's great. So they don't pay me to say that. I just love it. Anyway, deception, and it's a great skill. Now, this is an untrained action, so you don't even have to be trained in it. Now, being trained in it does help, but you create a diversion. It's a single action. You like pocket sand.
Pocket sand. Yeah.
So you pocket sand someone and you attempt a deception check and compare it to the PCs, the perceptions of who you're trying to get that attention to. Now, in my game, I have a player who likes to use this kind of in reverse. They kind of create a lot of sound to get people to stare at them to help their friends and allies. So if that's something your players are trying to do, obviously players talk out what you're trying to do with your GMs, and GMs or DMs listen to your players. It sometimes, like, some of that stuff is crazy, but a good portion of the time it's not. Like, it's very reasonable. So he likes to who create a diversion in which he gains the attention. So it's on him to help his allies. So in that situation, most of the time I give a bonus to their allies, to anyone within a certain range, where it makes sense. Usually he'll create a diversion. He'll do something to get the attention, and then I'll say, okay, that enemy, since it failed, it's flat-footed to the next attack from anyone, and they're usually cool with that. They're like, all right, that's kind of something. But in this scenario, if you're using it by rules as written, you create a diversion and you become hidden. So you become hidden and to the enemies who failed their perception check, and then that helps you because now they can't see you, and the creatures are off guard until you make an attack against them. So you cast a spell or you do something, which is great because a lot of times casters have AoE spells. They might become off guard, and then you can kind of catch a bunch of them. So this is a single action, so you don't have to really move, and you can still cast your spells. So that's a cool one. So look at that, I'm bouncing around the screen. Demoralize, a single action. This one does have a few requirements to it. Basically, you talk smack and you demoralize an enemy. It becomes frightened 1, which is great, or frightened 2 if you get a critical success. But basically, the caveat to that is you kind of have to share a similar language, or they have to be able to understand a similar language. Again, it's a single action, and you can still be untrained. So maybe your character doesn't have Intimidate, but they still want to try something outside the box. This, again, and it doesn't incur map or the multiple attack penalty. Neither did distraction. So both of these don't hurt attacks if you are making an attack later on in your turn, or if you ending your turn and you want to do something and you do fear that that multiple attack penalty. Demoralize or distraction, both of them untrained, so you don't have to be trained, or you can be trained and it does help you out. Your rolls are better. But at the low levels, this is great. Even now, I'm playing a high level campaign. I have a player. They're not trained in Intimidate. They rolled intimidation and they got a 20, and it just for them it panned out in their favor in that scenario. But again, frightened creatures, you're lowering stats, you're lowering saves and skill checks on the enemies, and making it easier to your teammates to help. So again, you feel like you're doing more than you are. You're casting 2 spells, and now you're like demoralize or distraction. Again, untrained, meaning you don't have to be trained. Especially players have like these concepts that like maybe my character doesn't lie. You could still do that, a distraction. Maybe my character isn't that imposing, but you could still try to demoralize. Maybe they missed their last attack, and now you're like, nah, poo-poo, you missed your attack. That's demoralize. You're talking smack. Now here's another one. This one is trained, and it's disarmed. This one is a hard one to pull off, especially for our casters who might not have a high strength or athletics. This is based on the athletics. It is an attack, so it does incur the multiple attack penalty. But in hard scenarios where maybe running or taking that 5-foot step isn't your best option, or maybe you made a strength-based, you have strength, and you took athletics in that fear of maybe your last character fell in a pit and, took that, grab ledge action because they didn't have the strength, they failed, and now you have an innate fear of falling, so you took athletics. You can try to disarm an enemy. Now, this is great, especially in early levels when you're fighting against goblins and they swarm, especially goblins or like kobolds or like those little like horde type enemies where they swarm you. You have to have a hand free. There are a number of weapons out there like the whip that have the disarm action. So the whip, you can use its range. It is a ranged weapon to disarm. So you smash, you smack their hand, they drop their dagger or whatever. Or if they're on top of the caster, you could try to disarm that one goblin. Again, it is an attack, but maybe you get that chance. And it's single action, so it's something to do. It's something to take a look at, especially for our casters, the hybrid casters like the Magus, the Cleric, or even the Bard. you know, those are options that they might have a strength bonus there. Now, the next stuff I'm going to talk about are skills again, but these are feats related to skills, and most of them are level 1 skills. And there's a few I chose that I feel are great. They're again, I'm trying to stick to single actions here, and most of them are single actions. And you know, you got big, you know, and they're gonna help your characters with, again, those moments where you're like, oh man, I don't know what to do, and I just feel like taking another. I'm just gonna use my move action, or I'm gonna cast my spell and shoot my crossbow, right? Like that. It's just, you feel like you're missing out on something, and you want to be more dynamic in your encounters. So here are the skills. So I'm going to shrink back down now. So here it's a performance based skill, fascinating performance. Now under performance, so let me jump over the performance real quick. This is an untrained action. You could use perform, and it you know, it does a number of different things you can do. It's a single action on your turn. It's concentrate, so sadly our barbarian friends, you'll have to take that feat that allows you to use a concentrate action. But for everyone else, you could do this. It's untrained. You could still perform. Now again, you have a few jokes and stuff. This might not be great against hostile enemies, but now you'll see why I chose fascinating performance. So fascinating performance says basically you use performance, and you choose an observer to fascinate. Now here's the caveat. In combat, you have to critically succeed, but if you're taking this feat, my assumption is you're a bard or a sorcerer, and you probably, bard, sorcerer, which could probably do this because they have that charisma jump, or even a cleric who has a high charisma. You can take performance and then take as a feat fascinating performance and kind of hope for those critical success. Again, if you might be able to do, because you know this isn't an attack action, you could demoralize to lower their saves, or maybe you do something to have you cast a spell to lower their checks, and then you do fascinating performance. This now gains the incapacitation trait, and you fascinate that enemy. That single enemy now becomes fascinated with whatever you're doing. You're juggling, you're doing that. This is a single action. Now it does require, you know, different prep, but also maybe you just roll it. You don't get that critical success. You didn't really hurt yourself because you can still you fall back on those 2 action spells. So that's something to take a look at. So this is a legacy feat. So those of you playing know that Pathfinder, there was like 2nd edition, and now there's a remaster. Anything said legacy is from the before the remaster. Now it's backwards compatible. This is Bonmont. Bonmont is for diplomacy. You have to have diplomacy, and then you could get this skill, and it's a great skill because it kind of does what fascinating performance does, but for diplomacy. Again, it's a level 1 feat, so you could take this very early on. Basically, what happens is you make a quip, you distract the foe, and it has a range of 30 feet. Obviously, it has the auditory trait, so you guys have to be able to talk, and you have to be able to share a language. And they make a will DC check, and if you pass, there's obviously the stages of success. So a critical success, basically they become distracted, they take a -3 to perception and will saves for 1 minute, or they can end it by quipping back. The target can end the effect early with a retort to your Bonmont. This can be either an action or it's some kind of, but it does take up an action, so you are eating up their action economy to help your other players and to help yourself. So that's a great option, especially if you're doing a diplomacy concept, like you're the talker, you're like, hey, everyone chill. In this situation, you're like, you come up with a quip and you talk, you're like, you kind of mean girl energy that character, that enemy that you're dealing with right there. So you come up with some kind of, maybe you talk shade about their clothing or something like that. But that's what the Bonmont does. And it's great because it's for diplomacy. Sorry. So we've talked about skills, and most of them are untrained, excluding the athletics Disarm, which you have to be trained. But you have your intimidation, which is Demoralize. You have your deception, which is create a diversion. Stealth is another one I forgot to bring up. But stealth, you can spend an action to sneak or to hide. Well, you have to hide and then you sneak. That's kind of the stages it has to go. Hide, you find something to hide behind, or use a diversion, or you kind of figure out a place to hide. You step into the shadows, you hide, and then again you become concealed, and then it's harder for the enemies to deal with you. Or you've created the distraction, either to give yourself concealment or to help your friends, your allies dealing with what's going on. And the trained one is Disarm, like I said. Then we talked about feats. We right here we have Bonmont, or again, fascinating performance. Switched over to that now. And lastly, obviously, let's talk about it. Let's get it out the way. Recall knowledge. Now, recall knowledge, let's bring it up. So again, recall knowledge is a single action right here. And basically, you make a check to understand what's going on with your enemies. And the reason why I wanted to leave recall knowledge for the very end is obviously it's always brought up in conversations. But here at the very end, let's talk about recall knowledge. Sure, recall knowledge is a way for the GM and the players to learn from the GM kind of what we're dealing with. Can the enemy be reasoned with? Does the enemy seem to be scared of anything specific? And it's gaining knowledge about the enemy. Now, the reason why I brought up recall knowledge at the very end is, as a GM, recall knowledge is a great tool for you to give lore to your players about your world. Maybe you are not playing in the Pathfinder universe, right? Maybe you're playing in your own homebrew universe that you started in, 5th edition, and now you've kind of transitioned to Pathfinder 2nd edition, but you want to keep your universe that you built, Maybe in your universe, goblins are scared of loud noises. Well, they use recall knowledge, and they remember, hey, there was that time we were dealing with goblins and some pots and pans fell, and the goblins seemed to get scared of the loud sound. It hurt their ears. Or maybe you like myself, I dislike spiders, so I've learned how to defeat my enemies. So maybe they're dealing with giant spiders, and a player's like, can I use nature? I want to learn about these giant spiders. I want to remember something about giant spiders. Is it light? Are they sensitive to light or something like that? Now, what a lot of people don't know is in the real world, spiders dislike the smell of peppermint. I didn't notice till I learned it later on, but they smell kind of through the hand, not the hands. It'd be terrifying if spiders had hands. They absorb scents through their legs. And peppermint is very powerful and a pungent smell, and they don't like that smell. And maybe your players find out, hey, spiders don't like peppermint or the smell of peppermint, and it just so happened that maybe someone on the team carries around a tea making set, and they just so happen to have peppermint tea. And now they're like, oh man, I have peppermint. I can use this to maybe take time to put peppermint on my sword, or to start rubbing peppermint on myself to kind of make the spiders not want to attack me. That's something that you can give to your players in a lore sense without just being like, oh, they have it says in the rules you're not supposed to give them the numbers, but you could be like, oh, they have an AC of 13 or 17 or whatever you want to say. Or like, oh, they shoot webbing, or this specific spider doesn't seem to have webbing. That's, maybe that's something you want to do. But now it gives you, the GM, the option to kind of come up with these really cool moments where you want to give your players lore. Maybe they're dealing with kobolds, and the kobolds have never had lemons. Or why does it always come to food? Maybe the kobolds like shiny stuff in your universe, and one of the players is like, I have shinies, and the kobolds are willing to have a conversation with you for copper, because to them they've never seen it, or they just want shinies. and they're like, yes, my shinies, I want shinies. And the players are like, sure, take all the copper you want. You know what? Here's a bag of shinies for you, and help us out these caverns. And that gives you the option to kind of lore drop, give more lore, make your world feel lived in. And that's why I think Recall Knowledge, while yes, it is a single action, is a great way for your players to learn, to help and learn what the enemies can or have the ability to do. But also it's a way for you, the GM, especially if you have an enemy that doesn't have much. Maybe it has a low will save, and you're like, well, you could tell, you know, this enemy, it seems to be its willpower isn't there. It seems to kind of have a low will strength. I don't know how you would tell that, but in that scenario, that's what you want to give them. Or in that scenario, maybe you want to say, hey, you know, instead of just being like, oh, it has a low will save, it also hates peppermint. So yeah, that's why I kind of wanted to save Recall Knowledge for the end. I also wanted to throw like a little GM fiat in there and say like, hey, it's a great opportunity to lore drop, you know, make your world feel lived in. So I hope this helped. I hope if the YouTube gods and the algorithm has brought you to NVNG, welcome. And I hope this video helped you figure out a few actions to take on with your single action. You know, as a caster, I know it's hard. I have lots of casters. I've played with a lot of new casters, and it's hard just having them see their teammates tumble through enemies, throw shurikens, and then like jump. And that's like a cool, like cinematic moment, and it's dynamic and fluid and just action based. And then the caster's like, I have omnipotent power. I cast Firebolt and I move 5 feet to the left, and it's Tina's turn. Knock yourself out, Tina. You know, you don't feel as dynamic. But in these scenarios, you know, you create a diversion. You know, pocket sand, and it helps you feel a little bit more dynamic, maybe. Or, you know, that Recall Knowledge is a great way for you, the GM, to start giving your players more lore of your universe. And that's something to think about when you're building encounters and kind of picking out what monsters fit in your encounter. Maybe you want to start to just come up with like weird things your monsters do, and that's how you come up with more lore that, you know, in your universe, it's just special to you and your players there. But again, I hope the algorithm gods brought you to our channel. Welcome to NVNG. If this is your first time, please, you know, do that subscribe button. We come out with tons of videos on how to play better games, how to GM better, and also how to enjoy having your game as a player. That's also, you know, stuff we do here at Nothing Venture, Nothing Game. We also are on Wednesdays, we do a live play of Pathfinder 2nd edition. So if that's something you want to do, check us out on Twitch. And yeah, welcome. And if you're a recurring viewer, thanks for checking this video out. Hopefully it helps, hopefully it inspires you, and hopefully it inspires your teammates. So with that being said, we are Nothing Venture, Nothing Game. We love rolling dice, giving advice with a little bit of that New York spice. See you later.